All right, guys, welcome to the Shack, and today we're going to be doing a little quick CNC project. This project, although I'm going to be doing it on the Shapeoko 5, which is my main go-to CNC for the shop, this project can be done on most any CNC as long as you know the settings, your speeds and feeds, and can, use a piece of scrap material, because that's all we're doing. I had decided that because I've been doing a lot of laser content lately, but I've had a few people ask me about how tough is it to do 3D engraving with a CNC. If you've got a Genmitsu or you've got some of the Two Trees or any of these CNCs, you can do it if you have the appropriate software. So we're going to be using VCarve and some free design stuff that's found in VCarve, and we're going to be making a little Christmas 3D CNC project today. So if that's something you're into, stick around and we're going to get started. All right, so before we start making any sawdust, guys, we got to get this laid out and designed in the software. The material we're using is 300 by 200, and it's about 20-something millimeters thick, and we're going to be setting this up to use the front left corner as the 0, and I'm just going to pick some random wood. This is actually a piece of magnolia that we're going to be using, just a small piece from the scrap pile over here. But we're going to get that set up to where it reflects the size of the material. And then this is some of the preloaded stuff that came with VCarve. And if you'll look down in here under the objects, there's this little Christmas bell. So we're going to use that one. There's lots of other shapes and stuff in there, but in the spirit of Christmas, that's what we're going to be using. And the way that you set this up, as you can see, when you bring this in, it's going to come in as kind of a depth map. For those of you that have used lasers, you may be familiar with that. It's similar to what we would use to do like a challenge coin or something like that with a laser. I'm just going to center that into material, and that way I know that it's equal space all the way around it for the remainder of the setup. Now, the next thing we've got to do is we've got to trace out this depth map and give us a little shape, like basically a line to work with. So I'm just going to go in here, and this little tool is made to trace around those with. I'm just going to black it out completely. I'm going to hit the preview button just to make sure it's going to kind of lasso all of it. It does, and so then we're just going to apply that. So the next thing that's going to happen is when we start getting this thing set up to do a rough and pass, it's going to take us over here to the material setup, basically. And you can do some tweaking here. These are things like you can put a gap above, a gap below the model. You can kind of move that 3D image throughout the material. There's a few settings in here where you can set up where your 0 is, whether it's at the surface or the machine bed. There's a lot of little trivial things in here that you can mess with. Typically, I don't. One thing that you do want to make sure is that your Z, if you depending on your clamps you're using, you're going to just set these Z settings right here, the Z gap above the material. You're going to want to make sure that your spindle is going to raise up enough to not collide with those. But other than that, really nothing to see here. Moving on to the next section, this is going to be where you actually set up the stuff for the rough and pass itself. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab ourselves a bit, and we're going to be using the Genie 1/4-inch compression bit. And the reason is I need a bit that can remove a lot of material and not take a long time to do it. And typically that's not something that the 3D final pass bits can do. So you want a bigger bit to rough it in and then a smaller one to finish it out. So over here to the right, you got different options of how you can engrave this thing. Model boundary, material boundary, selected vector, or selected level. We're just going to do the model boundary up there. And that is literally going to make the 3D model end at the edge of the boundary, which is that line that we set out there also. The one thing that we are going to do here is I am going to leave a 0.5 millimeter machining offset up there, and that's going to allow it to come back and smooth over with that ball nose bit that we're going to be using. Other than that, everything else is going to pretty much stay the same. I should have hit ramp plunges there with this compression bit. I don't know if I did or not. I'm sitting here trying to voice over this thing. But that's what we're going to end up with right there. And yes, that doesn't look like this exactly, But that's basically just removing the bulk of the material. So everything's going to have corners and it's going to be kind of bulky. But then once we go in there and add the finish pass, that's when it's going to start taking shape and looking like our actual project should. So that's going to be the next step that we need to do, is set that up for the finishing pass. And the finishing pass, we're going to use a lot smaller bit. I'm just going to remove this one here and reselect a different bit. I'll be using it's not going to be a Genie bit on this one. It's going to be one of my Speed Tool bits. And the reason is this is a 1/16 inch tipped ball nose bit. And it's a tapered ball nose, but the tip is only a 1/16 instead of like an 1/8. So it's a really fine bit for doing this. Give me a little more detail, sharper corners. And I just had to go in and tweak some of the settings. I'm going to remove that bit from there. Same thing. We're just going to basically leave this set as the same as what it was on the other one. The boundary of the vector is all that we want to do, and leaving everything else pretty much as is. You can make notes of that if you want, but I'm going to hit this and calculate the toolpath. And this is one thing that I do like about VCarve also, is you can preview like the entire project right here, and it'll show you what it's going to look like in the end result. And so that's what we're looking to make right there, guys. So before we get done completely, one more thing I do want to do is I'm going to take that line right there. I'm going to use the offset tool. I want to go outward around 5 millimeters and make myself a offset there so that I can cut this thing out but leave a little bit of a shoulder. So that's what I'm going to be doing there, and that's simply done by taking that tool line. I'm going to offset it, and then I'm going to select that tool line, go over here, and I'm going to add a profile tool line to that one. Basically tell it to cut the depth that I want it to, which I'm not going to go all the way through because I don't want to have to deal with this all the tape. So I'm just going to have it go almost all the way through, and then I'll finish it out with the bandsaw and a flush cut router bit. Not a big deal. If it weren't for all of the glue and I just don't want to gum up or all the tape and I don't want to gum up my bit, I would go all the way through, but we're gonna avoid the tape today. So I'm gonna be making sure that I'm using the Genie bit on this one. My speeds and everything look good, so we're just gonna go down through here. I am gonna ramp the cut, and the reason being, with this compression bit, you want to ramp it a little bit so that it doesn't just shove down in there, because it can scorch the material, burn the bit up, and it can cause bad things to happen. All right, before we get through, guys, we're going to do one more preview looking at this cut. We've got the cut installed now. I've got the 3D roughing, 3D finish, and like I said, I'm leaving some material in there just because I don't want to get into that tape. Everything looks good, looks like, you know, what I had envisioned. So now the only thing we've got left is to export this over as far as G-code over to my CNC. All right, guys, so now to output this file, what we're going to have to do, as you can see here, we've got a total of three different files. So I'm going to move over here to the Save Toolpath. You can do this several different ways. You can click all three, make them visible, and you can click visible toolpath to multiple files. And when you do this, what it's going to do is because these are different bits and different parts of the build, it's basically, and we'll go ahead and I'll show you. We're going to hit save. I'm going to go over here to, I'm just going to put them in my downloads folder, and I'm going to create a new folder. We'll pretend that this is a thumb drive or a saved drive on your other computer. All right, so we're going to name this Christmas Bells, and I'm going to hit save. So now when we go into that Christmas Bells file, let me get that open here, and I'll bring it back into workspace and show you. You can see here it has divided this job into three separate sections. You've got the roughing, which is going to be to hone out for the 3D. You've got the 3D finish, and then you've got the profile, which is the cut. All right, so you could run those, like you could run this one, then this one, then this one, if that's the way you choose to do it. Another way that you can do it is you can do visible. you can tell it to do visible paths to one file. Now, the trick to this is you're only going to be able to include files that use the same bit. So we would have to remove the 3D finish. This is going to, because it uses the same bit, this would allow us to do the 3D roughing and the cut with the same bit. And then just we're going to hit save. And when you come over here, let me delete these files so that we can demonstrate here. Well, if it'll let me. Just gonna have to delete these one at a time, but I want to show you exactly what it does. All right, so now when we come over here and we've got it visible toolpaths to one file, making them visible is just simply putting that little check in there. So then when we hit save toolpaths, now it's going to save this file that way, and that is only going to be one file, but it's going to be that one file that has is for that particular bit. So if you're going to do that, I recommend naming it, you know, the name of the bit, the number of the bit, whatever it is. That way you can remember. The other way, of course, is going to be to just come over here and just do selected and name and export them one at a time. You do have the option with some machines and using the right software to output directly to the machine. I use a different machine to run the machine, and it's not on this computer, so that I don't use that. But this is the thing that you got to remember right here, guys. If you're using a different CNC, this is the only thing that really changes from the file design aspect, is your post processor. As you'll see, I've got the Shapeoko 5 4-foot by 4-foot, the Genmitsu 4040 Pro, and the Genmitsu 6050. Those are the different machine profiles that I have saved that I can build files to. And that's all you have to do to, like, if I wanted to export this to the Genmitsu, I could just literally change it to the Genmitsu 4040 Pro. And now I have a file that will work with that machine. So it's very, very, very adaptable from machine to machine if you're using Vectric. So let's get this thing going. All right, guys. So yeah, Vectric, pretty handy, pretty cool. And if you're new at getting into it, just remember they do have this design and make. Basically, this is where you can get different, you can download files. You can get projects. I mean, it's pretty cool, especially if you're somebody who maybe you really don't care about doing your own designs. You just want to make things and have fun and maybe sell them. You can come in here. Now, they are a bit pricey, but you can come in here and buy these little project files and put your own stuff together. You've got like special occasions down here. You can go in here and they actually have a lot of different Christmas themed stuff. So lots of different ideas, and you don't have to be able to make files. And by purchasing them here, basically you would go through the same process as what we did on this one as far as setting it up. Some of these will be multi-piece. Good resource for folks that are, you know, maybe getting into CNC and wanting to do files and don't have the time or desire to make your own. These are, you know these are going to work with VCarve if that's what you're running. So there you go. All right, guys, so one of the first things we've got to do is, one, we got to make sure our material is on the bed of the machine securely and can't move. Now, the one thing I will share with you if you're new to CNC is you can never have too much hold downs, in my opinion. Now, you don't want them getting in the way, but always make sure your material is going to stay put, because I have ruined, the majority of projects I have ruined and bits that I have broken has been because I didn't properly have the material secured to the bed and it ended up moving on me. So always make sure that you have that secured. So I'm going to be using tape and clamps on this guy, and I'll move you over here where you can see what I'm doing. All right, so with the tape, it's pretty cut and dried. You want a good, smooth, clean surface free of dust on both your CNC and your material. You take, this is two-sided tape. This is X-Fasten. I've got several rolls of this. I've been using this for a while. It works really well. If there's one thing that I will tell you is try to keep your bits out of it. And if you do put a bit in it, just know that it's going to get stuck to your bit. And you're probably going to have to clean that up. I have found that with down cut bits or some compression bits at times. It tends to push chips and stuff onto the tape, and so it's less sticky and doesn't seem to stick to the bits as bad when you start getting into, like I said, with downcut bits. Upcut bits, it's going to drag this stuff up through the material. It's going to stick to the material, your bit, the whole 9 yards. So if you're using this, I recommend just leave a little, like just a little thin piece of material. Don't quite go all the way into this material, into the tape, and then just cut it off with the bandsaw or some other saw when you're done, and that keeps it out of your bits. So you'll thank me for that one. But yeah, it's like I said, regardless of the CNC that you have, guys, these projects are fun, easy, and using Vectric, any CNC you have is capable of doing the designs that I'm doing on this machine. Now, you may not be able to run my speeds and feeds, of course, and you may have varying results because, you know, the cheap, really cheap machines may have struggled with some of the definition and stuff like that. But for the most part, from my experience with the Genmitsu CNCs, I could have done this project on any one of them that I had. It would have taken longer, but I could have done it. So now that I've got, and I'm trying to make sure, guys, that we don't have a piece of material move. The last piece that moved on me cost me a $35 bit, so try not to have that happen again. So hold down is very important, because you got to think, there's a lot of pressure against this material sometimes when you're, especially when you're doing those deep cuts and you're really pushing the bit through the material. The 3D part, like the 3D finishing, not so much, but the Jenny bit, we're going to be cutting this and everything. That's going to be a good bit of pressure against this material that could cause it to shift. So the one thing that I do want to also do is make sure I get my material as square on the bed as I can. With the Shapeoko, one trick that I've learned is the way that they have these boards in here, and you have the T-track, is you can actually turn your material sideways, rest the corner of it on the aluminum, push it into the MDF spoil board, and then just rock it down, and you're good. And you'll notice when you get done that crack on that MDF board will line up evenly with the edge of material. So for you guys that have T-tracks and thought that was a bad thing, there you go. It's a good idea. It works really well. And this is secured pretty good. But like I said, guys, overcautious. So I'm going to make sure I have this secured as good as I can. And I'm using these are the Carbide 3D plastic clamps, I guess you would call them. You can 3D print your own if you tear these up or if you cut them. The cool thing about them is they're pretty low profile. The only parts that are near your material are plastic. And so if you do hit them with a bit, you're not going to hurt anything. They work really well, especially for 1.5 inches or so material. Start getting thicker than that, it can be a bit testy. So, got those on there. And just when you thought I was done, guys, I am not. We're not playing with this piece of material, I'm telling you. Don't want it coming loose. So I've got my little Rockler clamps here. The one thing I will tell you about these is I strongly recommend, if you're going to use these, do not use them on that side. If you've got the Pro, Sweepy Pro that I use, because even with them in the clamp position, this sticks up high enough to hit the bottom of the sweepy. So yeah, only use this on this side of the material. And I'm not too concerned with it moving. I have overkilled that something fierce. So we should be good. Now the next step, guys, is going to be to set the 0, of course, because you saw in that file, I set the 0 to the bottom left corner of the material. So that's where I need the machine to be. So we're gonna move this guy over here and go ahead and set this up. I'm pretty sure I already have the Genie compression bit in there, but we'll check that when it gets here and just make sure. And if you're using a Shapeoko and you haven't got yourself a controller, it works okay with carbide motion. I found that it's a little buggy, but I've got mine set up to use anti-micro adapter also for mapping the controller, but I've mapped the controller exactly the way that it works if Carbide Motion does pick it up, and so it's pretty handy. Once you get used to using it to set your zero and everything, it's pretty handy. And I'm going to say that's a downcut bit there, so we're going to need to change that. I want the Genie compression bit in there. Downcut wouldn't be a bad bit for this one, but with this harder material and doing what I'm doing at the speeds I've set it for, it'd be a little extra work on the downcut. So we're gonna put this back in there. Yep, Downtown Genie, which is a number 4 bit in the collection of Cody's. And I will put a link down to Cody's website if you're interested in the bits. This is going to be the bit we're going to be using, which is the Genie. This is the original Genie bit. It's a compression bit, so it's kind of like upcut, downcut at the same time. But I find that it does a really good job of removing material. Doesn't splinter as much as a traditional upcut as far as the pull out. And when you get done, you don't need to sand it as bad. So that's why we're going to run it. But I'm going to get my dust shoe back up. And what we're going to do is use this little probe here, and we're going to put this in the corner. I'm going to bring the machine down until I get it to where the bit is going in that hole. So now I've got to go over to Carbide Zero Motion. I'm going to hit the probe button, and over the left side of the screen, you're going to have a probe top corner, and I'm going to go ahead and hit that. This doesn't have to be exact when you're cutting stuff out of wood, but I like for it to be close. The Z is going to be probably the most important to have as close to perfect as possible. If the left and right's off just a little bit with this file, the way it's set up, I've got that margin of error, but the Z is kind of what you want to avoid so you don't get into the spoil board on your machine. So if you remember when we set the file up, we set it up to do the cut and the rough and pass at first, and then it's going to come back and it's going to do the finish for the 3D engrave. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go over here to Carbide and load that file, and that is as simple, and I'll just kind of walk you along here. It's clicking on run, load file, and we're going to do the Bell's 3D roughing with a Genie bit. We'll hit OK, and we're good to go. It's telling us in the software that should take 3 minutes. I'm going to move all my stuff out of the way and get a different camera set up over here for you guys, and we'll get this started. All right, so that got it done, guys. Got it cut out as much as I wanted it cut. Everything went the way it should. Got a little bit of sanding I need to do here to touch up on that, but all in all, it went well. So go ahead and get these clamps off of here. Like I said, abundance of caution, guys, abundance of caution. I did not want to allow this to move because it never fails when you're making a video. That's when this stuff's going to happen. So luckily we didn't have any issues. Nothing moved. And I only wasted a little bit of tape because the clamps, I mean, there's really no material waste there. Now, me personally, to get this off of the wasteboard, I have found, the spoil board, I have found that it's best to take this old chisel and I just kind of press it in there, get a little leg under it there and pull it off. Then once you get to the back side, usually you can just kind of get these things to roll up. It's kind of like a piece of fabric with sticky stuff. So it's not your average tape, but it is very sticky. And once you get that started, then you can just peel them off. And the cool thing is they don't leave a residue on the material that I have found. It doesn't make the material sticky or anything like that. So that's pretty handy. But yeah. So there we go. That is, as you can see, that's a good looking engraved there. I got a little bit of sawdust that was packed down in the cut that didn't get got, but for the most part, take it over to the bandsaw now, take this little bit off of it and clean that little peel up and we're good to go. All right, don't try this at home, but if you do, what the heck. Yeah, I've got a router table built over here, but I don't like changing the bits out all the time on it because I use it for roundovers. So, you know, whatever. Whatever works, guys, whatever works. All right, guys, so all in all, it turned out really well so far. Got to do a little sanding, but as you can tell with the Jenny bits, I don't get a lot. I did get a little bit on my 3D pass, but in their defense, that was not a Jenny bit. That was actually a cheaper Amazon bit. So now I'm going to get some sandpaper. We're going to clean this thing up and then put a little stain on it and see what it looks like. All right, guys, so all in all, I think it turned out really nice. As you can see, nice 3D engrave. And I didn't have to put a whole lot of work in with this file. And that was the thing I wanted to emphasize to you guys. I hear a lot of people asking me about getting into CNCs. What's a good starter machine? What's a good software? This is one of the reasons why I like VCarve. If you're not someone who wants to go and try to design a lot of files, you can literally use some of the clip art stuff that they have available in the software, or you can go over to their little download site and download those files that come with instructions, the whole 9 yards on how to do CNC projects. So not knocking any other software, because the only ones that I have really tried is VCarve, and I played around with Easel in the very beginning. I haven't tried any of the others, but I'm not knocking anybody. But I'm just telling you guys, from my experience, VCarve, whether it be with the Genmitsu 3030, Genmitsu 4040, 6050, or all the way up to the Shapeoko 5 Pro, the software works. You do have to know how to set it up with the post processors and output it in a language that your machine understands. But for the most part, file design is the same across the board. It's the mere exportation of the file to the machine. It's going to be a little different depending on your machine. But there's a learning curve for sure, but in my opinion, you can't go wrong when the software provides you the tools free of charge to make things like this. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's a cool little project. And if you were on the fence about getting a CNC and about what software to choose, then there you go. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not knocking Carbide 3D software that they have. It is a good basic software, and a lot of people love it, and a lot of people can design in it. I learned how to design in VCarve before I got the Shapeoko. And so once I got it, I just progressed on and just kept going. I do know that VCarve does offer tools and utilities that Carbide Create doesn't necessarily offer. So it's just a lot more versatile to me with any machine. If today I decided that I no longer want to work with the Shapeoko, but I want to go with a different machine, I can still use VCarve and export those files out. So to me, that makes it valuable, because if I get to knowing the Shapeoko software and I go to another machine and now I've got to relearn software. So by learning VCarve, I can run any of them I want, all the way up to some of the more advanced machines. So there you go, guys. Like I said, just a quick project idea for you. If you have a CNC and you hadn't got around to making a project, go for it. Now you know where to look to find some pretty cool graphics. But anyway, there will be links down below, guys, for both Vectric and Shapeoko. If you decide to go with one of those two, just click those links to let them know that I sent you. But until next time, be safe and have a good day.